I think we can go ahead.
Yes, sir. Please start, sir. We can start.
Oh, okay. Thanks so much. So yeah, just very quickly, welcome to all of you. This is our third week's interaction. And today, Dr. Manjari Jain and Dr. Maushmi Ghosh are going to be taking your questions. They've, of course, recorded the videos, the lectures that you have viewed this week. So I'll hand over to the two of you. Is there any order in which you'd like to go, Manjari, Maushmi?
Not really. I mean, we can just take Maushmi. Yeah.
Okay, I think Maushmi had the first couple of videos, and then you had. So maybe anyway, I'll leave it to you. And just for the participants, already some of you, excuse me, have sent in questions for the faculty to answer. But at the same time, those of you who have not, if you have additional questions, please type it in the chat box here in Zoom, and then Manjari and Maushmi will come to them and answer them in turn. So I'll hand over completely to you. I may not be able to stay the entire time, but over to you, and looking forward to really nice discussions. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. So we can begin with the questions that have already been sent. Jobin, could you help us with that?
Yes, Maushmi. I've already shared the document with you. Can all the questions are there?
All right.
Yeah, okay. I've separated them. Your questions and Manjari's questions separately.
All right.
Shall I?
Yeah, if you could just go through them for us, that would really be helpful.
Okay. Yeah, so the first question is for you, Maushmi. Do birds change their feeding behavior and shift to alternate foods in absence of regular food? There are red-vented bulbuls who visit my terrace every day to eat raisins, which I put out for them. Is it all right to feed raisins to the bulbul, or will it disrupt their normal eating habits?
All right. Birds do show some flexibility in their diet. They'll definitely remain in the same overall group. So, for example, if it's a seed-eating bird, it's going to, mostly eat seeds. Also remember that, most birds, whether they are frugivores or nectarivores or granivores, they all do feed, depend on insect food when they are feeding their young to meet protein requirements. But other than that, they mostly remain in the general feeding guild, food items within that general preference they show. Regarding raisins for bulbuls, I'm not sure. Manjari, would you have any suggestions?
Reasons for bulbuls. Sorry, what's the question?
Yeah, if the
student at my terrace every day eat raisins when I put. Is it all right to feed raisins to bulbul? First of all, I think feeding anthropogenic food to wildlife, I'm myself not sure about it, although I must admit I have been feeding birds off and on, give them some food, but I'm not so sure. There's a lot of debate about this anyway. So unless we really, winter is one time when we usually put out bird feeders, but whether bulbuls will eat raisins or not, one could do an cafeteria experiment, and you can put out some other kinds of food for them and see if they prefer raisins or not. If they if they do not eat it, when option is available, then it just simply means they have no, they would not want to have it. I would just go by that, but I don't know whether it's okay to eat raisins to
even I'm not clear, but you can go through some general guidelines. So some certain websites like Royal Society for Protection of Birds and all, they do have some instructions they put out about how, if you want to put out a bird feeder, what are the things that you could keep in mind. So you could follow those general guidelines, I guess. Yeah. Jobin, can we move on?
Yeah. So the next question is slightly, okay. What new bird behavior techniques have evolved using technology? I am particularly interested in knowing if camera traps have gained more prominence and if there is a way to adopt scalable digital technologies to undertake multiple studies with defined hypotheses.
All right. So from what I understood, the person wants to know about the use of technology in studying bird behavior. As you mentioned, camera trap is definitely useful. There have been studies. So it can be really useful. Say, for example, if you are monitoring behavior in the nest, like how many times does a parent visit while feeding their young, how many times, or what is the proportion of time they spend in a day incubating an egg. So these are some specific examples where people have used camera trap monitoring to like study these kinds of behavior and measure these kinds of behavior. Other than that, we do use call recording equipment to study calling behavior of birds. So these are some of the things that are being used right now. Yeah.
So the next question is for Manjari. I mean, there are a few questions for Manjari, I think. Shall I go ahead and ask you?
Yes, Juban.
Yeah. So how and why brood parasitism may have evolved in few bird species?
Yes,
yeah.
It's actually a very good question, and I just wanted to say that we know that brood parasitism is in fact very rare, and I think it's less than 5% or 3%. But why it evolved and why is it such a rare behavior? There are, we know in general, cheater strategies cannot be common. That is because if the cheaters are higher in frequency in the population, now let us just forget about brood parasites per se. Let's represent them as a form of cheating behavior because they are cheating the host in some sense, right? By making them the foster parents. Now, if cheaters outnumber the ones who are providing care or the ones who are putting in the energy, then you can imagine there's going to be very strong selective force driving the host to evolve strategies to avoid brood parasitism. So first of all, we should ask the question, why does it exist at all? It exists at all because they are so low in numbers. So cheater strategy, the cheaters are lower in frequency and therefore they can exist. But given that cheaters exist and that it works for some of the bird species, the question immediately then comes, why don't all other bird species also evolve cheating strategy? And the answer to that is, one, there could be phylogenetic inertia. Certain traits evolve in some kinds of individuals, and then therefore, there's an inertia. So only those group of individuals will have those traits. But otherwise also, why doesn't it spread in the population? Again, I think the check comes from this arms race kind of a situation where you have hosts are also discriminating against brood parasite. It's not like they do not discriminate. So in some sense, it is also a risky strategy. It is not guaranteed that it will succeed. And brood parasitism, mostly when we talk about brood parasitism, we look at interspecies brood parasitism, and we often do not think about within species, although this can also happen. But I would say two primary reasons. First of all, the cheaters have to be lower in number, otherwise it will initiate very strong selection against. So they have to recognize the parasites. The host will evolve strategies to avoid being parasitized. And second would be phylogenetic inertia. That is what I would say. Suhail, Maushmi, do you have any thoughts on this?
Nothing to add. Suhail, if you have something.
No, I don't have it. Thanks. I don't have it.
Okay, so I'll move on to the next question. Are there courtship rituals where females try to attract males?
So there is sexual role reversal, definitely, where females are the ones or rather, males are the ones who get to choose. Okay, so sexual selection, as we know, can come about by two ways. One is male-male competition. The other is what we call as female choice. And we say female choice because that's the norm. but this one of the sexes choosing is only one of the two mechanisms by which sexual selection can operate. Now, for females to display, females to court, it will require that there is sexual role reversal. It will require that the females are the ones who would be displaying and the males choose. We know that polyandry, for instance, is already very rare. And it is rare for a good reason. I hope we have all understood why it is rare, because of disparate investment by females. So to begin with itself, females are investing much more and they have much more to lose. So polyandry anyway is rare, and paternal care is also very rare. Now, in the cases where there is polyandry, we know that sexual selection does exist, but it operates through competition. So females compete to gain access to males and not the other way around. So in that, I do not know of examples where females court males by displaying and the males take the role of the female. But definitely there is participation in many monogamous species, as you already know. Females do display. It's not just the males who display. So both partners basically take part in the display. So that is, of course, there in many monogamous species. But females displaying and males choosing, certainly not very common.
The next question is, in many birds, the females are larger, especially raptors. Is this more as a result of birds being theropod offshoots, or is it a result of evolution? What could be the possible reason for this?
So first of all, the first is also part of evolution only. It's like, that's how they have evolved, right? So, but why are females larger? We know that is in fact not uncommon at all. In fact, that is the norm in the animal world. Females are typically larger, even in insects. It is only in mammals that there is evidence that typically the males are larger. And one of the hypotheses that has been proposed is male-male competition drives males to become larger in case of males. So they compete to get access to females, and that is why males are larger. But there has been a proposal that it may not come via sexual selection, but may even happen through natural selection, because males and females have size difference. So the sexual dimorphism is driven by natural selection with respect to foraging differences also. But for birds, females being larger, in fact, there was, so this is called reverse sexual dimorphism. And there was a paper which actually examines this specifically, looking at what could be the reasons for reverse sexual dimorphism, especially in raptors. And the argument that they put forward is, in raptors, typically it is the females who provide care. And so they do not provide evidence per se, but they argue, so it's a verbal argument, that the females provide care and the females have to ward off predators. So since the female is the primary caregiver, this may have driven the evolution of larger size in raptors for females. But in the animal kingdom, it is nothing surprising. Females are the ones who are larger bodied, and of course, there are biological, physiological reasons why females must be also having larger fat reserves, and in general, a larger body frame. I hope that answers. If you want, I can send the reference to the paper, Jobin, to you, and you can forward it to.
Sure, but this is in the, yeah, okay, yeah, that will help.
But there is a paper out there, and you can, yeah.
Okay, so the last question, I mean, in the, at least in the Google sheet was, are greater painted snipes polyandrous?
I don't know if there is a systematic study, but what little I know from about the greater painted snipe is that they are polyandrous in some places, but monoandrous in some other parts of the world. And in India specifically, whether they have been studied or not, I'm not so sure. I think there is some evidence from some study in Africa and some other places, but yeah, they are polyandrous in some places, This is what I know, but in some other places, they are known to be monoandrous.
Okay. I think, Maushami, there are a few questions on the chat box for you. The first one is fecundity. If there are 3 eggs, one is pushed out or falls off the nest, is the fecundity 3 or 2? It's the offspring that are born that is counted? Question mark.
All right. So the answer to that question is that the fecundity is 3 because it refers to the number of eggs produced. If you refer to the offspring that are fledged, that will be the number of fledglings or some other. So that's different from fecundity. It basically refers to the amount of energy or resources that the female puts towards production of eggs. And what it is determined by is, of course, the availability of resources. And it is also affected by nests failing. So, for example, if eggs that are laid like this, if all are destroyed due to nest predation or accidentally falling like that, the female, if she has enough resources or if she is physically, in a good condition, she might attempt laying more eggs, increasing the fecundity for that year. So it essentially refers to the number of eggs produced. Yeah.
Okay. The next question is again for you. What is density dependence / independence in terms of R and K strategy selection? Is it herd size? If yes, then how can we explain this in context of animals which live solitary life or lone predators like polar bears, tigers, for that matter? Bird question. Yeah.
All right. So the basic difference between the species showing R selection and K selection strategies is for the species that follow the R selection strategy. Basically, for them, the growth is not controlled by resources available in the environment, or rather, their population is too small compared to the resources available in the environment. So it is not capped or dependent on the amount of resources in the environment. On the other hand, for K-selected species, which are mostly large-bodied, long-lived species, it doesn't refer to an individual's growth, it refers to the population's growth. So the growth of such larger-bodied animals or birds is capped by how much overall resources are available for that population to use. And so things so density dependent factors basically kick in the populations of such large bodied organisms, and they could be in the form of factors such as diseases or parasite infestation, any such factor, the intensity of which can increase if there are more individuals. So you can imagine in case of a disease like if or any parasitic or bacterial viral disease, if there are fewer individuals in the populations, the chances of transmission is low and fewer individuals are going to be affected by that disease. Whereas if there are lots of individuals, it's going to spread much faster and cause greater damage. But when you look at other factors, mostly natural calamities like floods or fire, irrespective of what the population size is in a particular site, the chances are that it's not everyone's going to get affected if the calamity is extreme enough. So that's how these things operate. So it's definitely not related to herd size, and density dependent factors do operate for species such as polar bears or tigers also, which are territorial and solitary in nature, because it operates at the scale of population, not individuals. So even for tigers, it basically relates to how much resources are available in that entire landscape where the tiger population is operating. So we do see effects of density dependent factors. So if, for example, you have a park which has like Cobbett or Kaziranga in our country, which has a very high density of tigers, chances are if there is any disease outbreak, they are going to be affected much more than other places which have very low density of individuals. I hope that is clear.
Yeah, I think it should be. Okay, so the next question is quite a long question, and I'm not sure who it is addressed to, but I'll just read it out. Dear Madam, in the feeding ecology, according to Tiamu Baidu, water depth selection, daily feeding routines, and diets of water birds in coastal lagoons in Ghana, she categorized water birds into 7 categories only. There are 7 categories. Then she has classified only 7 categories. What about flamingos, rails, gulls, kingfishers, raptors in this category? Another question, what does she mention? Pelagic foraging shorebirds. Normally, other ecologists categorize visual foraging and tactile foraging shorebirds. She only categorized shorebirds into 3 categories. Explain about pelagic foraging shorebirds. I hope you got the question. Should I read out the categories that she mentions?
It's fine, Jovin.
Yeah.
I'm just reading it. So in general, of course, I think I would ask you to read more about pelagic foraging shorebirds. But in general, what happens in these kind of foraging studies is we define these categories based on our primary objectives. So no two authors might go with the same categorization. That is the thing. So here she was interested in water depth selection, and I think her categorization kind of is tailored to looking at the impact of water depth on foraging behavior of these water birds. So for instance, and also you might also want to take into account the whatever the assemblage of birds that are there in the habitat. So it depends on these two factors. The question that you're interested in asking, if you're looking at a particular resource that or ecological segregation of the habitat, you might have a different categorization. If you want to look at a particular, say for example, if she was interested in looking at segregation amongst all the fish-eating birds, she might have a very different categorization and a finer categorization as well, only looking at those particular birds. So I would say it differs, and you cannot expect standard definitions. What is important in every study that you undertake, if you are interested in foraging, studying the foraging behavior of any species in particular, what is very important is objectively defining each behavior in a way that anybody wanting to replicate or redo your study should be able to do it without any ambiguity. So you need to basically have to justify why you are categorizing them into a defined number of foraging behaviors in terms of the question that you are asking, and you have to have very clear definitions of each of those behaviors, which is unambiguously understood by everyone. So that is the most important thing. Yes.
So the next question is, are some bird species affected by secondary succession of ecosystem?
Yeah. Manjari, please go ahead if you would like to add something.
I was just trying to understand what is the specific question. I mean, of course, animals are going to be affected by changes in the habitat, but what is the specific? It's not very clear to me.
This is Krishna. This question was from me. So I meant, ma'am, that when there are forest fires and then when we see secondary succession or growth of grasslands or like grass and a new forest ecosystem after the forest fire, does it actually really affect the bird species, or do they turn to normal as soon as the secondary succession is over?
So what it really depends upon what kind of ecosystem it is. If it is prone to natural, forest fires or intermittent fires or a very dry habitat where this, so the kind of response that the animals are going to have, including birds, to such a habitat is going to be very different from a place where unnaturally, a very massive fire breaks out, which is going on for months. So it really depends on that. If it is a dry habitat where on and off fire does occur. For instance, in many grasslands, in high semi-arid grasslands, and in areas where there's soaring temperatures, this can happen even naturally. It is not that all forest fires are unnatural. So once it's the part of the natural cycle, and once vegetation comes back, it's, and their breeding cycles would have evolved such that it avoids certain times of the year, right? So it really depends where the fire is, where the succession, and how natural or unnatural this is.
Okay, so in the case of unnatural, so basically then it means that the bird species can be completely lost due to an unnatural secondary succession, which
If
happened.
that bird species is found only in that habitat, in that one small pocket, what if there is something that happens to Gir? What will happen to all the lions, right?
Yes, same way. Okay. Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Okay, sorry, can I interject? Can I just suggest that try and ask your questions through the chat box, because otherwise there can be a conversation happening here, but there are many questions that are remaining to be answered. We have only another half hour left. Yeah. So perhaps if you want to speak, maybe ask in the chat box first, and then when you are given permission, then you unmute. Yeah. Thank you.
I'll go to the next question. So his question is, I have seen gray hornbill once and it was having a large chunk of bark in its beak. Can you explain the use of bark for the species? Is it food or nesting material?
I don't know, actually.
Even I'm not clear.
Suhail, would you know why that hornbill was carrying some bark? Or do hornbills usually?
Without knowing more about the context, it's hard to say.
Yeah.
As you know, hornbills do close their nest holes, but usually that's with the softer material like dung and mud and so on. So difficult to say.
Okay. There are a few questions which are mostly NPTEL based, like email to contact, exam related question issues, and would Devika be answering these questions, or would we do that later?
Yeah, can I suggest that maybe you and Devika can answer those questions at the end?
Sure.
Is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
But don't forget to come back to them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
So then the next question is, how can we identify difference between male and female bird species in pigeons, please?
As in, how do humans distinguish, or how do the birds distinguish themselves?
I think that's the question. How can we?
Humans? So humans may not be able to distinguish, but because, like we mentioned, that there are several species which lack sexual dimorphism. But that does not mean that there is no sexual dimorphism, because there may be colors that are not visible to us and are visible to the birds because they can see at different wavelength. They can see ultraviolet. So it is possible that we may not see sexual dimorphism visually, but so a pigeon may be able to make the difference between a male and a female, and we will never know.
Okay, so the next question is, in species that have lekking behavior, is it the only breeding technique that they adopt, or do they also have other behavior for mate selection?
So in general, species have evolved mating and breeding strategies. So when a species exhibits lekking behavior or exhibits certain kind of resource defense polygyny, this is the kind of mating behavior that has evolved in that species. So that is the primary behavior that the species exhibits.
Okay. This question, the next question is probably for Anand, but I don't know if you want to take a that. In extremely cold temperatures, how do nocturnal birds maintain body temperature?
So I mean, I'll just attempt this, although like you said, Jobin, maybe Anand can explain this further. So homeostasis is something that is of great interest, and especially the various adaptations birds show, for instance, how does the hummingbird maintain its body temperature? How does it regulate? We know it regulates it by metabolism, by increasing the rates of metabolism. But then what does it do when it is sleeping? It goes into what we call as torpor. So it really brings down the metabolic activities, and such that, that amount of temperature is not even required. So it becomes almost equal to the ambient temperature, the body temperature. So there are different strategies. There are strategies also by which birds minimize heat loss by reducing the circulation to the extremities. That is another way in which they can avoid heat loss. So, I mean, and of course, there is fat. So both in males and females, one of the very important ways of getting insulation is fat reserves, which provides regulation, which allows regulation of body temperature in birds. But maybe Anand can at some point detail this a bit more, depending on.
I'll ask him as well, probably post it on the forum. The next question is, how poisonous are Papua New Guinea poison birds, and what is the poison? What is the kind of poison?
I don't know.
Okay, so the next question is answered. Okay, what is the state of the Great Indian Bustard breeding program? Can it succeed?
So Hel, maybe you should.
Yeah, I can say a little bit about it. So I don't know how much detail to go in. You know that their entire section on conservation will be following. Although I don't know how much we'll be talking about captive breeding. Captive breeding, as you know, is like the ICU, intensive care unit in conservation. It's when it's a measure of last resort, when nothing else is working, the patient is about to die or the species is about to go extinct. Then you take some individuals into captivity to keep them in reserve so that the species doesn't go extinct, with the hope that down the line the conditions become ameliorated, they become better, and individuals can be released into the wild again. So that is the situation with the bustard captive breeding at the moment. And the eggs that have been taken and hatched right now in the breeding center in Rajasthan, those individuals are not for release. They are actually supposed to be for breeding stock, and they will breed, and then down the line their offspring or grand offspring will be released if the conditions are right. So far, they've been extremely successful. They have a very high survival rate, very high success rate, which is very commendable, because actually bustards are very difficult to breed, and nobody has bred, as far as I remember, nobody has bred the Great Indian bustard before in captivity. They have bred other bustards. So I think things are looking good, but remember, this is at the ICU stage. So they're looking good at this but bustards as a whole, the prospects are very bleak for their survival if a habitat conversion and things like power lines, all the threats to bustards continue as they have been so far. Thanks.
Okay, the next question is, if diet is the reason why colors form in birds, and some form of metabolism makes males colorful and females subdued in color, what happens with regards to mating plumage? Okay, this is the question. I
think this is a question for Anand, Jobin.
Yeah, I mean, but it's been asked on the.
Okay, we'll focus, if you don't mind, on the questions that are about the lectures that were from this week.
Sure. Okay.
Because the faculty we have here. Of course, Manjari, Maushmi, if you feel if you'd like to answer any of the other questions, you're welcome to. But Jobin, maybe those can be posted on the forum, and we can request Anand to.
All right. Yeah. So then the next, I mean, if none of your, I'll go to the next question. What determines clutch size? Question mark, availability of food. I mean, yeah, he's asking if the availability of food determines clutch size.
Yes, definitely. And like availability of food is one of the primary determinants of clutch size. But as you might have seen in the lecture, another determinant of clutch size is also latitude. So for the same species, there is for many groups of species, there is an increase in the clutch size as we move from lower latitudes to higher latitudes. And yeah, I think I discussed the reasons behind it in the lecture in some detail. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next question is, I think, for Manjari. Why are there diverse array of sexual preferences exhibited in birds in general, from monogamy for a reproductive period, monogamy for life, polygamy, polyandry? Question mark.
That is the essence of biology. And that is how it is different from most other fields as well, because what is the basic fundamental unit of selection is variation. All of natural selection, sexual selection, everything, evolution itself rests on the fact that there is variation. Variation is good, it's not bad. Unlike in physics and math, if there is variation, then there's a very big problem. But basically, in biology, the very fact that there is variation has allowed so many diverse forms to come about and evolve. So it is nothing surprising. In fact, this is the norm, because there are many different types, and from each may be a successful strategy for a certain category of individuals who have certain kinds of physiology. It works for some, it does not work for some others, and hence many different kinds of behavioral strategies can exist in animals, including birds. But typically, for a particular species, it is one strategy. I guess that answers, I hope.
Thank you. So the next question is, dear ma'am, can you explain why flamingos produce nest mounts during breeding season? Can you please share any reading material or research article on breeding ecology of flamingos in India? I'm from Sri Lanka. No any evidence of breeding of flamingos in Sri Lanka. Please explain about nest mounts.
So given that flamingos are near water, so it just makes sense, right, to have their nests around water bodies, and to keep their eggs dry, it makes sense to elevate it into a platform. So it is unlikely we'll find the red-vented bulbul having nest mounts near water bodies, right? This is a species that exists in the canopy and not near water bodies. But flamingos are near water bodies, and they have their nests close to the water bodies, but to avoid getting inundated, so it's good to have a higher platform, raised platform, hence nest mount. I will look for some reference material, Jobin, and I will share it with you, and then you can post it in the forum.
Yeah, thank you. So the next question is, do bird behavior patterns change when they are kept in captivity in abundance of resources with respect to foraging as well as reproduction?
With respect to reproduction, I would not jump to say yes, because it is something one expects. Okay, so if I'm assuming the question is that once they're released back, will their reproductive strategies have changed? So
yeah.
No, that will not happen. Foraging strategies or foraging preferences can change if these are some of the preferences are learned through the lifetime of an individual. But innate behaviors, which are the behaviors that the organism has is born with or is evolved, is hardwired, these are unlikely to change. So even though you may be feeding raisins to the red-vented bulbul, and if it was in the cage, and once you let go of it, it will still go out and forage in the wild as normal. So the innate behavior does not change so easily. Learned behaviors may change. So both reproduction and foraging, these are very hardwired behaviors, but they can they can learn some additional, they may develop, one particular individual may develop a certain liking for, I don't know, reasons.
Okay. Thanks. And I think the next question is from Mashmi. Dr. Ghosh, as you have worked extensively on wobblers, and since differences in them are very subtle, can you please refer us to a paper that can elaborate in detail such differences for better identification?
I'm just sending you a link. So a few years ago, I wrote a blog with Dr. Umesh Srinivasan, who will also be teaching you in this course about identifying these leaf warblers. So I'm just sharing the link here. Please have a look at it. I hope it makes it easier for you.
Okay. Yeah. And again, I think a question for you. Studying foraging behavior is one, but what other studies do ethograms help in? Can you give us some other examples?
All right. So ethogram are not specific to foraging studies, but they are basically used in all kinds of studies to do with studying animal behavior. So, for example, if you're interested in looking at mating behavior, say antagonistic behavior, or anything at all to do with behavior. Whenever you're studying animal behavior, the first step is usually to develop an ethogram. Yeah.
Okay, the next question is again for you, I think. Your answer on, okay, this is regarding the word category question. Your answer on bird categories in research studies, you use the term bird assemblages.
Yeah.
Can you please define bird assemblages? Hope Dr. Jen can also add to this.
Yeah, so basically an assemblage is basically all the bird species present in a area defined by you, whatever your study area is. By assemblage, I refer to all the complex of species that you are studying or you're interested in. That's how you can define it. Yeah.
Yeah, so just to add to that, so how do we distinguish between a community versus assemblages? One of the things, at least this is what you will get from most reviewers, is that you only call it a community, and not the term community should be only used when you know that there are ecological interactions between the individuals. However, like Maushami said, all the individuals that exist in a given time and space are part of the assemblage. So there, specifically, they need not interact with each other. So that is an assemblage, but we'll call it a community if they are also interacting with each other. And by interaction, I do not mean just communicating with each other or the kind of thing. They could be interdependencies and things like that. Then it is called an assembly community. Otherwise, it's an assemblage.
All right. Dr. Ghosh, this is a question for you. Can you explain S0 SN related equation here?
S0 and SN. Okay. Yeah. So basically, this had to do with defining adult fitness, so basically overall fitness of an adult, and the equation basically states that it is a sum of the survival probability of an adult, which is not to do with reproduction, and SN is basically the survival probability of an adult, which is not to do with reproduction, and SR is the survival probability of an adult, which is to do with reproduction. So to define the adult's fitness, we use a product of both these, so SN into SR, and then we also add something called SO or S0, which is the survival to 1 year of age of the offspring of that adult multiplied by the number of offsprings produced. So basically what we mean is that the adult's fitness is defined by its own survival probability, which has to do with reproduction, as well as the parts which are not to do with reproduction. Maybe those could be to do with how much resources are available for the adult survival, how well it is able to avoid predation, and then you also have to add how well what are the chances of offsprings of that adult surviving and reproducing themselves. So this is what these two quantities together define an adult's fitness. Is that clear?
I hope so. I mean, it's clear to me. Yeah. So So the next is, I think, based on this same, ecological segregation of water birds. So you have shown a redrawn picture of various guilds of water birds. You have categorized waders as visual foraging waders, tactile foraging waders, and pelagic foraging waders. Can you please explain about pelagic foraging waders?
Okay, all right. I'll just get to that figure just for my reference. Yeah. All right. So basically, it refers to species that are foraging inside in the water. Yeah. In open water. Hello. Yeah, I hope that is clear.
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Madam, normally, hello.
Yeah.
Can I talk?
Yes, please, please.
Basically, when we study about we categorize shorebirds into two categories only. Visual foraging shorebirds, they normally use visual cues, and tactile foraging shorebirds. So this term is very new for us, the pelagic foraging shorebirds. That means they, instead of feeding on substrate, they feed on very shallow waters.
Yeah.
Is that the meaning?
Okay, so pelagic is basically not shallow water, but it's more deeper open water. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The next question is there a study of bird behavior giving early signals of wildfires? I think, is there a study that talks about birds giving early signals of wildfires?
Not sure.
Not
Okay.
sure.
Okay, then I'll move on to the next question. I think it's about shoe-billed stock end up raising only one chick, as the younger one is generally killed by the elder chick. Why such a behavior in nature, whereas many other birds, all chicks are raised without any sibling rivalry? Same seen in tiger shark also, I believe.
Yeah, so there is, I mean, not just in birds, like you rightly said, it is sibling rivalry is there in even in plants. So, and in fact, this entire field of study called parent offspring conflict and sibling rivalry. And one of the most notable figures from India who's worked on this on plants is Uma Shankar and Ganeshaya. So you can read more about this to look at the evolution of these behaviors. And the answer is already there in your question, that yes, there is sibling rivalry, and which when specifically when there is limited resources, one would expect this to evolve in systems where parent can say, for instance, a parent can provide for only one offspring satisfactorily. One would expect that there would be greater conflict between sibling to access resources, and resulting in sibling rivalry. So, and it's not uncommon.
All right. The next question, what do you suggest on marsh harriers making fake nests near breeding sites? I saw marsh harrier carrying stones for nesting at different locations. Would you want to comment on that? So
I don't know about marsh harrier, but in general, there are several species who make multiple nests. Some are what we call as practice nests, whereas some are like decoys, which is to reduce the chance of predation. But I do not know specifically what the marsh harrier does. But there are several species who make, even the Baya weaver, for instance, makes multiple nests. And the final one may not be the one that it had started with. But those are practice nests, and in some other cases, there are decoy nests.
Okay, some of the questions that have come up are, okay, I'm not sure where this question sits exactly, but are geotags inbuilt in the DNA of birds for their offsprings to go back to their nesting sites?
I wish.
We knew.
Okay, this is, I think, a continuation from a previous question. If we release foreign birds not found in India from captivity, does it survive?
There are so many exotic birds found not just in your cages at pet stores, but in the wild, which have been introduced by people all over the world. Oftentimes, they even become invasives. So it's not about survival. So oftentimes, it is the exact opposite, that they may be displacing the native species. So yes, they do survive, but it depends.
Yeah.
This cannot be a blanket answer.
Yeah, it depends on the specific traits of the birds. Yeah. Yeah, they're commensals and are good with surviving in human habitation. They, even if they're exotic, they might do very well. Like mynas are in Australia. Our mynas are in Australia, a complete nuisance. But some certain birds, if they're specialized in their habits and if they're released in an exotic habitat in an exotic country in the wild, they might not do so well.
Okay, the next question is a very similar question. So I think I'll just read it out. It's a do exotic bird learn to adapt to different ecosystems? I think the answer would be very similar. Okay, the next question is lifespan of birds study done? Question mark.
Yes, in many species, people have looked at how long they survive in the wild versus how long they survive in captivity. So yes, such studies are done, I guess.
Okay, some of these questions are repeated, and I suppose, okay. From social monogamy discussion in razorbills, what is the motivation for the females to visit the mating arena post laying eggs and engaging in EPC?
So you must understand, extra pair copulation does not mean that it is solicited. If the female is visiting the mating arena to block the EPC extra pair attempts of the partner, for instance, she may be courted by other males simply because she has arrived in the arena. And there can also be, force mounting. So it is not that it is solicited. So in that sense, asking this question is somewhat slightly misplaced, I would say. It's not like there's a reason for them to seek extra pair copulation post or pre-laying.
All right. I think a few more questions are left, and we only have like 6 minutes to the end of this session. Okay, I think Moshvi, this is a question for you. I'm still confused between fecundity and fertility. Please explain it once again.
All right. So fecundity is the number of eggs produced in a reproductive episode. Fertility basically refers to how many number of offspring are produced, and this is specifically usually used in the reference to a mating pair. So fertility is basically the number of eggs that survive, and fecundity is the number of eggs that are produced. Yeah, I hope that is clear now. Yeah.
So this question again, one more question, very similar, not to fecundity part, but the question previous to that: is there breeding or forced copulation that happens in birds without any agreement from female? Like
not just birds, in all kinds of species, all kinds of animals. So forced copulation is not uncommon, but also in many species, females can even eject the sperms, like I discussed in the lecture. So the females have far more control over reproduction and mate choice than we would imagine. And also in some animals, there's also rejection of sperms even post mating and post copulation at the level of fertilization. So that even the cryptic female choice internally can also happen. But yes, there are forced copulations do happen, and females in many species, the females simply eject the sperms.
Right. I think this is the last question that pertains to this session. Do parents ensure that all chicks are fed equally? If all eggs don't hatch on the same day, would the ones that hatch first have a definitive advantage in survival?
So the ones that hatch earlier uh, will have an advantage if the resources are only present for a small short window and the later ones miss that window. If that is not the case, then we know that the birds have a way of assessing the hunger levels by looking at the coloration of the mouth. So you look at the buccal cavity when you see the chicks who are begging, the mouth appears red, orangish red, and that is because all the blood vessels are there, which is a reliable indicator of hunger levels. And that is also one of the reasons and this is an innate behavior, this is a hardwired behavior, that they use that as a cue, as a sign stimulus to feed the chicks. And this is also one of the things that is exploited by the brood parasites, because the brood parasites gape will be much larger and therefore a much larger visual signal of that red gaping mouth, and therefore they end up feeding it oftentimes more than its own chicks. But otherwise, if hunger levels are really reliably associated with the redness intensity of the color of the gape, then there is no reason to believe that they will feed one more and make such mistakes. Because once they are satiated, I am guessing that those levels, color intensity will change. But again, these have to be tested and experimentally examined.
These the next questions are not technical, they're more like reading materials on clutch size. I think you've already done that, Moshmi.
Yeah, it's on the course website.
Yeah. So, and can the timings of these online programs be shifted to a later time, say 6 p.m.? I mean, it all depends on the availability of professors. So, yeah, I think all the questions. I think the questions that are related to Anand's class can be sent again to the discussion forum. I'm hoping Anand replies to them. I've already sent him a mail. So yeah, that would I'll post them as soon as I get a reply from Anand. But apart from that, I suppose, yeah, and I'll check if there are more questions on the YouTube.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the lecture.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Manjari and Moshmi.
Thanks, Devika. Thanks, Jobin.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jobin, for coordinating this. Yeah.
See you, Moshmi.
See you. See you,
Bye.
Manjari. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, sorry, before ending, we will just take up some questions which were for us. Jobin, there were some questions asked, right?
Yeah. So,
someone asked whether answers to the assignments will be available. Yeah, so all the answers are available. So once an assignment deadline is passed, please go to the assignment again and you will see all the right answers there.
Okay.
And the right answers to the multiple choice, the subjective assignment, we will be posting very soon.
Then there's another question on recorded link of this session. Like where is the link for the recording of?
The link to this recorded session will be posted on the NPTEL platform again, the dashboard.
Yeah, and yeah, I think technical ones are. No, I can't find any more technical ones.
Yeah, I think I was answering them in between. So
yeah.
Cool.
Right. I think Anand's question. I think I'll get back to everyone on the forum itself after I receive answers from Anand. So, yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.